We are live. It's been confirmed we are now live. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. This is Emma Code, Democratic Officer. Good morning and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Cornwall Schools Forum. Before consideration of today's business, I will outline the protocols for the meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed to the public via Microsoft Teams and is also being recorded. If the Council's live stream fails during the meeting and we cannot share the proceedings, I will adjourn the meeting so that access can be restored. If the issue cannot be resolved, I will halt the meeting and the remaining business will be concluded at a future date. If a forum member experiences a technical issue, I will adjourn for a short period to try to re-establish their connection. When forum members are speaking, they may choose to use their video. As forum members are called to speak, I will remind you to switch on your microphone. If for some reason you cannot be heard, the Democratic Officer will advise you. Votes will be taken by a show of hands using the raise your hand function carried out by the Democratic Officer. Where a forum member has declared an interest, they must leave the virtual meeting, their departure will be confirmed and they will be invited to rejoin the meeting at the appropriate time. To confirm the procedure for today's meeting is that forum members who wish to speak on an item should indicate by typing an X in the chat box, or you can use the raise your hand function. Before we start today's business, I will now call your name if you can confirm your name and the organisation you're representing. Catherine Hunkin.
Hello, yes, I'm Catherine Hunkin. I'm from Key School.
Thank you. Pete Tamlin.
Pete Hamlin, Carbiel Junior School.
Thank you. Bill Marshall.
Bill Marshall, Humphrey Davies Secondary School.
Thank you. Craig Martin.
Yeah, Craig Martin, Redruth School.
Joe Lombard.
Joe Lombard, Smart Primary Schools.
Thank you. Adrian Massey.
Hello, Bridge Schools, Multi-Academy Trust.
Thank you. Sean Pinhay.
Sean Pinhay, representing Southerly Point.
Rob Gasson.
Hi, Rob Gasson, Wave Trust.
Chris Wilson.
Hi, Chris Wilson, Weybridge School.
Guy Chappell.
Good morning, Guy Chappell, Special Partnership Trust.
Helen Adams.
Good morning, Helen Adams, Truro Nursery School.
Katie Fitzsimmons.
Hello, Katie Fitzsimmons, Diocese of Truro.
Martin Tucker.
Good morning, Martin Tucker, Truro and Penwith College.
Reuben Wallace.
Reuben Wallace, National Education Union, on behalf of Ian Williams, Cornwall Education Unions.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkin.
Morning, Sally Hawkin, Lead Member for Children, Public Health and Wellbeing.
Thank you. Councillor Rogerson.
Morning, yes, Pat Rogerson, Member for Bodmin St Leonard and Chair of the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you. Ian Bruce.
Yeah, Ian Bruce, Cornwall Association of Primary Heads.
David Barton.
Good morning, David Barton, Cornwall Association of Secondary Head Teachers.
Thank you. I can also confirm that the following officers are present. Kate Evan Hughes, Service Director. Sharon Hindley, Head of Education, Access and Sufficiency. Julie Lemazurier, Head of Special Educational Needs. Jacqueline Piper, Head of School Effectiveness. Gareth Rees, Strategic Finance Manager. Andy Wynne, DSG Analyst. Leah Musto-Shinton, Senior Corporate Governance Lawyer. Myself, Emma Code, Democratic Officer. And Lynn Beardsmore, Meeting Producer. The first item on the agenda today is apologies for absence. I can confirm that I have apologies today from Juliet Moran. So moving on to item 2, election of chairman. Could I please ask for nominations for the election of chairman? Rob Gasson, are you proposing somebody?
Yes, I'd like to propose Guy Chappell.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for Guy Chappell? Thank you. Bill Marshall, are you seconding that proposal?
I am indeed.
Thank you very much. Are there any other nominations? Thank you. There being no other nominations, could I ask forum members to indicate by a show of hands that they're in favour? Thank you very much. I can confirm that vote has been carried by majority vote. Thank you very much. You can all lower your hands now and we can move on to item 3, the election of vice chairman.
Good morning. Thank you, Emma. Is that I take over from here, I trust?
You can do, yes.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. First and foremost, I thank Bill and his role as chair in the past, obviously leaving very large shoes to fill, and I will do my best. In terms of a welcome, are there members here that are attending for the first time to the Schools Forum, may I ask?
Chair, it's Emma Code. Yeah, we have today attending for their first meeting, Martin Tucker and Katie Fitzsimmons.
Okay, thank you. Then welcome, Martin. Welcome, Katie, to a very formal and interesting Schools Forum meeting. So if I can move on to item number 3, election of the vice chair, could I ask for any nominations, please? So I'm not seeing anything in the chat or any comment at all. Emma, am I allowed to propose as chair?
Yes, of course you can, yes.
I'd like to propose Bill Marshall.
I'll second that.
So Emma, do we
need to check there are no other nominations before we take the vote.
There's a deafening silence.
In that case, Chairman, you can take the vote by a show of hands.
Thank you very much. Can I ask colleagues to show their hands in support of the vote? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Chairman, I can confirm that Bill Marshall has been elected vice chairman by majority vote.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you all.
So moving on then to item 4, declarations of interest. And Emma, I'm assuming that we're asking colleagues if the position has changed since the last meeting. I'm aware the meeting was a considerable period of time ago, and you will look to update the declarations of interest in due course.
That's correct, yes. The annual register forms went out in January of this year, and they will be going out again in January of next year. But it's really to ask any forum members if they've got any interest on the items on the agenda for today's meeting, and if they do have, they should declare them now.
I have a hand up from Catherine. Oh, you put your hand. Is that a legacy hand up, Catherine? And I have a hand up from Phil as well.
Microphone muted.
Colleagues, could I just remind us, hands are for voting, X in the chat for speaking, please. Sorry to be so formal. Okay, there's a hex there with no name. Is that you, Bill?
It was. I'm not sure quite why it's come up with no name. I apologise. I mean, certainly I put an X in the box.
Yeah, by all means, you shoot box, please. Hit your first, Bill, and then Catherine.
Okay, so just to say, I think I've actually got the same interest as absolutely everyone else, but on the agenda we've got the growth fund mechanism for secondary schools, and I'm affected like any other secondary school, but with an historical perspective as well. So just want to make sure people are aware of that and know where I'm coming from. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Catherine, are you the second X?
That was an error, sorry. I thought I'd put my hand down before.
No problem, thank you. Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Item 8, overview, 4 spend blocks, high needs budget, post 16. As principal of the college, obviously, that has an impact on the college.
Okay, thank you.
Cornwall College, who I represent today as well.
Thank you. Any more declarations of interest or positions changing before we move on? Okay, Craig.
Yeah, like Bill, I am affected by the growth funding mechanism on this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, colleagues? Okay, thank you. Then we'll record those, please, Emma, and we'll move on to item 5, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of December 2019. Now, colleagues, that's almost a year ago. So if it's okay with you, we're going to check the accuracy carefully because I think it's important. I'm going to make the assumption that the action points and the work that was committed to has been completed in the nearly the 12 months following that meeting. So if colleagues are happy, we'll go through them page at a time for matters of accuracy. Page 1. Okay, page 2. I'm aware this might be a memory test. Page 3. 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Nine. Page 10. Colleagues, could I just comment at the top of page 10? The sentence budget setting process in January, final budgets will be presented to the next meeting of the schools forum. Just to comment really and ask council officers, obviously this is the next meeting of the schools forum, but we've moved on considerably since that point. Are those budgets available for information should colleagues wish to see them? Is that a fair question? Andy Wynne.
Hello, yeah. I think we're basically going to cover the CSSB block transfer in a later paper, and as I remember from what I put together, the 2021 CSSB budgets are detailed in that section.
Right.
So yeah, apologies for not bringing them back to meetings, but this is the first meeting since we promised that. So yes, we cut our cloth accordingly, and with the block transfer we're able to set some budgets. Those are detailed on page 53 of the report pack.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you. So we'll come back to that and later in the agenda. That's very helpful. Thank you. So finally then, if there are no more comments on, or actually on 10, page 11. So colleagues happy to sign those off as a true and accurate reflection of the meeting?
Chairman, could I ask for a proposer and seconder then, please?
Thank you. I'm happy to propose.
Okay.
And if that's appropriate.
Fine. Is there a seconder? Pete, I think your microphone's on.
Yeah, I'll second that. Thanks.
Thank you. Could I ask for a show of hands that everybody's in favour then, please? Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that's being carried by a majority.
Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, colleagues. So moving on to item 6 and review of the Constitution. Emma, could I ask who is leading this item, please?
Chairman, it will be Leah Musto-Shinton taking this item.
Thank you. Good morning, Leah. Would you like to talk to the paper and answer any questions?
Yeah. Hi, morning everybody. I'm Leah Musto-Shinton, Senior Corporate Governance Lawyer at Cornwall Council. So I'm presenting the report on the Cornwall Schools Forum Constitution Review, which is found at pages 12 to 15 of the agenda pack. My recommendation is that the amended constitution for the Cornwall Schools Forum, as appended to the report at pages 16 to 26 of the agenda pack, is approved. So the Cornwall Schools Forum Constitution was last reviewed at its meeting on the 17th of January 2017. So due to the passage of time and also the enactment of the Schools Forum England Coronavirus Amendment Regulations 2020, which provide for remote meetings like we're having today, it's necessary to undertake this review. So my proposed amendments are shown by way of track changes to the appendix, and those changes are due primarily to the passage of time and changes in terminology for the council and other bodies. 2, to ensure that the constitution is aligned with the latest schools forum regulations and guidance, and 3, to satisfy the requirement to review the membership of the forum. So before I conclude, I did just want to point out a drafting error which I'd like to amend before we seek to approve, and that's found towards the end of page 24 of the agenda pack, and that's paragraph 10.4b. That should read as one whole paragraph, so I would propose the removal of little 1 and little 2, and also the word either and the colon, so it just reads as one whole paragraph. Any questions?
Thank you, Leah. Any questions generally on the document or the content? Okay, colleagues, I'm not seeing any X's in the box. Leah, I had one comment on 8.21, but I'm not sure it's a constitution or a process. So Emma, this might be something for you. I'm conscious of the time between meetings, and 8.21 illustrates the forum may establish working groups. And I know later on the agenda there's the possibility of creating working groups or task finish groups, etc., etc. I'm just conscious, do we have a process for feeding back to forum members in between meetings, should we need to, on the progress and the work of that work group, is my question.
Chair, we do have 4 meetings scheduled for next year, so that we would hope that those working groups would sit within that cycle of meetings, and then they could feed back into the forum meetings, which will be taking place in the spring, summer, autumn and winter terms. So we would hope that as long as those meetings go ahead, that any working group information can be fed back through those forum meetings. I also noticed Bill Marshall has put an X in the chat box, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. Bill?
It's a little bit of a legacy one to some extent. Actually, the first point I was going to do with the X was just when you asked for any comments or feedback or questions arising, it was to say it was actually, I've been doing it for a number of years. I just thought it was a good process we've gone through, and the work Leah's done I thought was, really helpful and clarifies a lot of points. You've raised though 8.21, and I'll take you back to it, Guy. One of the issues for me on that one was around, it says the decision of such groups must be ratified by the whole forum in order to require Cornwall Council to take account of the findings. It may be that I'm not sure if it's the word decision, you see, do they make decisions, that subgroup? They may be providing a view, they may be giving an opinion, it might be contributing towards the ongoing work of the council. But if it gets to the point where it's actually going to be, this is going to make a difference to something that falls within the scope of forum, then if it's going to have to feed back to forum, and there's a risk that meetings may not happen, not necessarily because we've got online now systems, but there's been delays in the past, could that be a problem for us? So does it become a barrier to move things forward the way it's worded?
I think if there is no bar to a subcommittee of the forum or a working group having the ability to make a decision, and I think that paragraph is denoting that if they are exercising those powers, that those decisions would have to be ratified. I think if they were just providing an opinion or advice, and that ratification would only be necessary if it was being forwarded on to Cornwall Council for formal consideration.
Okay, Bill, yes, sorry, Emma.
Sorry, I'm also just to comment that the Constitution does allow for any decisions, urgent decisions, to be taken via email as well, should that issue arise. So if there was a decision that required ratification through the working group and for whatever reason there wasn't a forum meeting, then there is that option as well. But we would hope that we would hold forum meetings, obviously, if there are any items of business to be discussed. So the way the cycle would fall, we should be able to capture any of those issues that arise from any working groups.
Okay. Yep. Is that okay, Bill?
All good.
Yep. Thank you. Any other comments, colleagues? Again, I have one of process, and again, it might not be appropriate, but I'm conscious the Constitution is very clear and worded to provide clarity. Should items of business come up through the form that actually aren't part of the discussion, or perhaps operational, or questions or queries, do we have a process by which that business is taken outside of the meeting and dealt with in due course?
Emma, do you want me?
Yeah, I'm happy for you to comment, Leah. Yeah.
I mean, for me, that would be chairman's discretion. So often we're in council meetings and other issues are raised which aren't necessarily directly connected to an agenda item, or issues arising which are operational. And I think normally it's the call of the chairman to guide that person to take that offline and to deal with it outside of the meeting. I don't know, Emma, if you want to add anything.
No, Leah, no, that's absolutely fine.
No, thank you. No, very happy with that. Thank you. Chairman's discretion. Any other comments or items to discuss under this before we take a vote? Okay, so colleagues, can I ask for a proposal to adopt the revised constitution, and a seconder, please? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Bill. So we can now take a vote, Em. Is that okay? Show of hands.
Yeah, if we so it's proposed by Katie and seconded by Bill Marshall. If we could have a show of hands that everybody is content with the Constitution review and the amendments that Leah has just outlined.
Emma, sorry, it's Bill, and I don't mean to interrupt, but that X was actually to say something, and that's the problem with the nature of this system, and the lag that exists. Just been pointed out to me, just to check in the mix, in the table of the different representatives, it actually talks about pupil referral unit being a 0. I get the fact that that's historical, it's legacy, it's showing the change, but actually it should just be removed from the table, full stop.
Check that.
By all means.
Yeah, the actual regulations do specify having a representative from a pupil referral unit, but we are conscious of the fact that Rob Gasson is the representative of that, but he does fall within the academy representative. So if you look at the table allows for one extra person from academies, which includes the pupil referral unit. So academies would be 12, but because the pupil referral unit falls within academies, that's why it says 13. But we've kept it in there for if for any reason it becomes a maintained element, then we've still got that vacancy there which would be filled. I hope that makes sense.
Again, I should put an X maybe. So on that basis, does that mean that we as a body have Rob here with his hat on as an academy head, not as the equivalent of the crew head, because if it's the Prue one, that might mean there's an academy vacancy. I just want to know numbers. Sorry, Emma.
The academy representation is 12. The pupil referral unit is 1. We can amend the academies to 12 and put the pupil referral unit as 1, if that would make it clearer.
Alex Lear on that one.
Who is the officer, sorry, who's present at the meeting who reviewed the numbers, Emma? Is it Dave?
Andy Wynne.
Andy. Does Andy want to add anything before I suggest something?
Could we just change the wording on the page 16 to say pupil referral units brackets including academies?
And drop the 1 down.
And just drop the 1 down?
Yeah.
Clear then, because we can have pupil referral unit representation, whether it be from maintained or academy then.
Yeah, I think that makes it clearer.
Okay.
Okay, colleagues, are you happy with that solution? Could I just check before we go any further? I've got hands up from Chris, Wilson, Craig, Sean, and a head teacher.
Oh, crap.
Are they legacy? Thank you. Helen, do you want to say something? No? Okay, thanks everyone. So it's all right, it's all right, Chris, don't worry. So in that case, with all comments and amendments, could we move to, where did we get to? We got halfway through the vote, I think, didn't we?
We did, Chairman. So can I just go back to the proposer and seconder, that they are content with the review of the Constitution, the amendment proposed by Leah, and that we amend the figure on page 16 to change the pupil referral unit number to 1 and the academies to 12. So if they're happy with that, we can then take the vote.
Katie?
Yes, I'm happy.
Thank you. Okay, so we move to vote, Emma, then I think.
Bill, are you happy with that?
Yes, sorry, at that point, because of not knowing who was actually the different people who were doing the different bits because of the number of X's. Yeah, apologies. Yeah, more than happy. Well,
okay, Chairman, we can go for the vote by a show of hands, please.
Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that that motion has been carried by a majority.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And thank you, Leah, for the hard work on that and patience. Appreciated.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 7, which I think is the DSG papers from Andy Wynne. Andy.
So just switching everything on. Yeah, this is normally a verbal update. I normally give you some sort of feedback on where we are with regard to the premature retirement costs and the schools in financial difficulty allocations. At the moment, mainly due to the fact that we've been sort of dealing with lockdown and working at home and various other things, we have only just opened the application window for schools in financial difficulty. We have a couple of applications that I'm aware of that are coming our way, and we have a panel meeting provisionally booked for the 18th of December. So we'll make some decisions at that point. The premature retirement cost update, we have a budget of £139,000. This is to assist maintained schools with in-year redundancy costs. So far, we have a £40,000 spend. A lot of the expenditure on this item comes in towards the end of the year, but at the moment, it's looking like we'll be able to offer 100% reimbursement. If the claims come in at more than 139, we'll start to pro rata reduce those reimbursements so that we don't exceed the £139,000 budget. And finally, there's a growth funding mechanism which Helen Peerless and myself have been working on to look at revising the current growth mechanism. We've been aware for a number of years that there's been a large cohort of growth moving through primary that's now starting to hit secondary, or that started to hit secondary a while back. But the secondary mechanism wasn't really being particularly generous. So we've spent some time reviewing that, and the changes are outlined in a document that's an appendix to this sort of verbal update that starts on page 27 and runs through the next 4 or 5 pages. I'm not sure if Helen Peerless is going to be joining the meeting to take any questions, but if there are any questions or comments, I'm happy to take them. I may not be able to answer them, but I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Andy. You happy to take them now? If we ask colleagues to collect in the chat.
Yeah, quite happy.
So, colleagues, any questions, particularly on the pupil growth funding proposal? Okay, Bill.
Guys, I'm conscious that I said at the beginning that in this particular one, you know, I'm slightly concerned in terms of where I sit on this. So if I need to step out, I can step out. The point I want to make, I think there is a generic one rather than in specific schools. The mechanism as a way forward, it's really good to see that there's been an adjustment, and particularly from a secondary perspective, I can say that, you know, it's welcome. But it's noted that Andy there has sort of, you know, used that term that that the schools, some schools have been growing rapidly for a little while now, and they actually saw this growth funding coming through for the last few years, and we're recognising that it's not necessarily been generous, for want of a better term. Those schools won't see any of that because there's nothing retrospective in this, and you know they've had that growth and have had to carry the cost issues associated with that, and will continue to for some time, and that causes worry. All right, I mean, all of us are facing difficult times at the moment, but the introduction of a lump sum as big as 65 grand in the mix, which would have contributed towards possible building and capital infrastructure costs, which have been carried by individual schools, that's a concern. So I think it's the right way forward. It's concerning that it doesn't resolve the issue for those that have gone through this, and I'm not sure how many that might be. I'm aware of at least 2. Okay, so that's open-ended.
Thank you, Bill.
Would you like me to respond? Yeah.
By all means, Andy, please.
Well, what I'm going to do by way of response is to say that, you know, we've done the modelling on this for the 2020-21 financial year. So we can see what the retrospective adjustments would be for that year, and we plan to run this mechanism to cover the 2021 financial year. We need to go back and look at 2018-19 and 19-20 to see what the impact would be financially. But I'm going to throw over to Sharon now, as Helen Peerless's line manager, to offer some more detail if that's possible.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yes, so just to reiterate what Andy has said, subject to the finance situation, the money that we've got within the growth pot, we do want to have a look at whether we can make any retrospective awards, particularly where secondary schools may or other schools may have missed out on this new way of working. So it is something that we've acknowledged, and we will be able to do a bit of recceing up sort of later on in the year to see what money we can then move over to schools who may have missed out, because we recognise that the new approach is more beneficial than it was previously.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. I've got an X without a name, colleagues. I'm terribly sorry. So if you typed, please go.
That could be me, Guy. It was only to actually say, just to acknowledge that and say thank you that consideration has been given. That's really appreciated, and I can pass that back.
Thank you, Bill. I think I'm learning on Teams excessive chat as well. Every day's a school day, isn't it? Okay. Are there any other colleagues that want to comment on Andy's papers or verbal updates? Okay, we'll just continue with the awkward silence in case there's a delay in the connectivity, or Andy, if there's not anything else to say, we will move on. Thank you.
Guys, sorry, I didn't do the X. It just appeared by magic.
Fine.
I have another report a little bit later on, so if something occurs in the interim, then I'm happy to take any comments or questions during that later report.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Thank you for being flexible. Is that okay, colleagues? If we have some reflection time and any further questions for Andy, we can pick him up later on the agenda. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rob. Okay, so we'll move on, if we may, to item 8, which is the overview of the 4 spend blocks, pages 33 to 45. And taking order, Andy, are you taking the first part of the agenda item?
I wasn't planning to.
Okay.
There is a small amount there about the Central School Services block, but it's largely around the high needs and provision.
Sorry, Andy, I'm just following on the agenda, so I'll hand over to Sharon and/or Julie. I'm assuming it's you.
Sorry, Guy, delay on the system getting on to you. I think it will be somewhat of a double act, if that's all right, because the way the papers are structured, we seem to dip in and out of each other's areas of responsibilities. So in the paper, despite Andy's diffidence, he provided a useful background at the beginning, showing the pattern across the budgets, and particularly if we're concentrating at the moment on high needs block, I'd like to draw members' attention on page 35 to the proportion of the high needs block which is spent directly, goes straight back out of the council to different education providers. I think it would be pertinent for me to pick up on some aspects and then Sharon to fill in the gaps, if that's all right. So I'd like to comment on the independent special school places. That's page 37, where there has been an increase in the use of independent special school places. We still rank as a very low user of this provision. Of course, each placement is financially costly, and the reasons for that are set out in key bullet points. I wish to assure for members of the final bullet point that there is full use of our current area resource bases and our current special schools, and that this drive for increased places is often caught up in a supply and demand pattern. Yes, when there is supply, then we have sometimes the parental demand, which is linked into the legal processes for seeking such placements. If I move on to page 38, it's about the post-16 SEN provision. There has been increase in the number of young people who have education, health and care plans who stay in education since the 2014 legislation. This is an impact of that legislation over time. So we're seeing that build up, and colleagues, I'd like to draw your particular attention into the useful graphs that are on the bottom of page 38 and 39, showing the correlation of numbers and costs in this type of provision. We are taking actions around these factors. For the independent special schools, page 42, there's reference to the dynamic purchasing system, which is about the quality assurance and costing and how those placements are made. We, as a market tool, as demand currently outstrips provision, we wait with interest over coming years to see how that might have a financial impact for us. Also on page 42, there's a brief couple of paragraphs which are actually summing up a very wide range of activity that's currently been undertaken with the 31 different post-16 providers that we have. And that programme we're midway through that programme, and colleagues will notice that there are identified priorities for action that have been confirmed with providers. It will be overseen by the post-16 SEN strategic group, which includes membership that is in common with some of the members on forum, and monitored by the high needs block recovery group. So we feel that that's a key area of activity, but that is underway. The element 3 funding, this is the funding that primarily goes to children and young people in mainstream schools, bottom of page 42. The value of a unit, the currency in which this funding is allocated, was increased in April. I believe that would be welcomed by mainstream colleagues. And you also will see on page 43 an increase in the number of young people who are in receipt of element 3 top-up funding over time, in line with the increased numbers of education, health and care plans that we have in Cornwall. Again, that is a trend of increase, but it aligns with the national picture, and we currently have 3,200 children and young people who have had education, health and care plans. That was a whistle-stop tour, Guy. If anyone has any questions on that?
Or does Sharon, it was part of the double act or triple act with Andy, is there anything else you'd like to add, Sharon, before we open to the questions?
Yes, so if I come in, and apologies, we are jumping about a bit, but if I could signpost you to pages 35 and 36. 36 specifically demonstrates the increased demand and increased spend against alternative provision from 2017 to to current day. So you can see clearly why the spend has gone up, and obviously the increased demand. In terms of what we're doing, it's and I know Rob's on the call, Cornwall Council, so through Together for Families, we've formed a strategic partnership with WAVE to address all our concerns around access to APAs and to work with schools to support inclusion and also to make sure that we've got the right provision in place for children and young people in Cornwall. If I could move you to page 40, where I speak a bit about the mitigations that we put in place to try and manage the demand and supply of APA placements. And that through the Pupil Place Partnership, which is one of those mitigations we've put in place. That's been around since the 1st of September this year. It's been in development for 18 months, and that is our single point of contact for pupils requiring alternative provision, and also the route out of AP. So it's to support that revolving door approach that we're always keen that we can reintegrate children back into mainstream school as soon as is suitable for them. We're also working to develop the team around the school approach, and so my colleague Frances Valentine, who isn't here but I know colleagues will know, is working to develop that approach, and we're piloting the inclusion and belonging framework across a small number of schools in the forthcoming weeks. And this is all about promoting and supporting inclusion, supporting schools, supporting children and young people, and also being mindful of the capacity issues that we've experienced previously across APA. What isn't in the report, but what I did want to bring to members' attention, is the fact that our numbers of permanent exclusion this year are considerably down on where they were for the same point last year. So that is to be applauded, because schools, we know, are having a challenging time at the moment, and they are, when I looked at them last time, I think they were some 60% less than where they were for the same point last year. So there is a lot going on around support for schools, around inclusion, and also to support access into APAs and routes out of. And it is viewed that the PPP and the strategic partnership that we have with WAVE will really go a long way to better manage our supply and demand, and crucially the spend and the further pressures against the high needs block. In addition to the APA, I put some information in around about what we're doing around the early years block. So that's the ring fenced element of the early years block of the DSG. And if I could take you to page 41, is what we're undertaking is the review of how we can use an element of that early years grant. So it's that 5%, it's 5.22 from the regs, about whether we can use any of that funding where services are currently funded through the high needs block, whether we can do any movement sort of block transfers, and so we ought to try and alleviate some of the pressure on the high needs block So that work is underway at the moment. It's fair to say it's not going to make a massive difference, but every little will help to reduce that pressure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before opening it up for questions, and Helen, I can see you'd like to say something. Is there anything else to add, Sharon or Julie or Andy, for the item before I open it to the group?
No, thank you.
Okay, lovely. So could I, Helen, please go ahead, and Kate next. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I've got a few things to say on this element actually, but picking up just on what Sharon, you've just been mentioning about that 5% for the early years. Can I just ask, it may not be that you have the answers now, but can I just ask that Forum could have a little bit more detail on that? Because obviously representing nursery schools, I read that several times and had lots of questions around it. Don't fully understand where the savings look like they might be met. And I'm a little bit concerned that, what the impact might be on the sector. So, for example, we already know that the inclusion grant, which I think comes out of that 5%, is that right? I'm not sure. The inclusion grant has already been cut in terms of allocating any funds to children under 3. So, our youngest children, our 2-year-olds in our society, are not able to access any additional, with complex needs, are not able to access any additional funds other than the EHC. And so I would argue that actually being able to try and find savings within that, we'd want to know a bit more detail about the impact, because I think already the sector is being impacted by not being able to gain additional funds for our complex 2-year-olds. So, yeah, just would like some clarification, really, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Helen. Sharon?
Yes, as I said, it is a work in progress at the moment. It's an area of review, so we don't have any outcomes, but I'm more than happy, subject to chair's agreement, if you would like a report on what we have identified, and also feeding back on the queries that Helen's raised. I work in partnership with Carol Kimberley, the head of the Early Years Quality Improvement, and it's something we do together, so very happy to bring that back. I think it's important to say as well that during the COVID situation that we have been able to make additional funding available to our whole early years sector through discretionary grants for those settings that were able to remain open and support our key worker and our vulnerable children. And some settings, but most settings benefited from that, some settings didn't, but wherever we've been able to, we've been as flexible as we can with that funding and increased funding where we are able to. With regard to the EHCP and the specific question, I will need to come back to Helen on that, because that area would sit with Carol rather than me.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Helen, is that okay? So we're scheduling a report from Sharon to provide clarity and update on those savings and progress thus far.
Yes, thank you. I'm just conscious that we need to look at the impact before any action is taken, but if Sharon's willing to bring that forward, then I'm happy.
Thank you. Kate?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, because of the position that we see with the DSG, and we can't underestimate the impact of that, and we see that nationally, but we can't just take our eyes off it because it's a national picture. We've established a DSG task force group where every person who's involved in the DSG as a budget holder is being involved. Chair, with your permission, I'd like to seek representation from this forum, because I think it's really important that the forum's engaged in those discussions rather than it being presented. So if you're happy to seek a nomination, we'd be happy to receive that nomination and include them in that task force work.
Thank you, Kate. More than happy to seek a nomination. Colleagues, can I ask you to put in the chat whether you're happy to be nominated or express an interest in joining the DSG task force group, please? I'll leave. Thank you, Bill. Is that an expression of interest?
It's a bit of both. It's that understanding of exactly what the scope of it is, and I think that's maybe why other colleagues aren't saying, "Yep, I'm up for that," because it's appreciating quite you know, what demands there might be on that. I think there'll be a number of people who might be interested. It might be worth saying, you know, I would be interested, depends on how wide it goes, what it's about. Others might be in the same boat, so maybe something could be circulated on it, and then we can come back to Kate, because it sounds like, as ever, there's some good collaborative working going on.
Sounds sensible. Helen's asked sort of related to that question in terms of early years representation. Is that something you could provide quickly, Kate, to allow colleagues an opportunity to reflect and nominate?
Yes, I mean, the essence of it is we have to get the GSG back into balance because we don't have the reserves to keep calling on, but I'll send a paper via the minutes.
Okay, thank you, Andy. So you heard the remit there. So at the moment, Helen has expressed an interest, but I won't hold you to that, Helen. And Bill asked for reflection on the remit, which we've sort of had, and a little bit more explanation perhaps shared with the minutes. Should we ask for a time? Right, so we'll ask for a time for any more nominations, but at the moment we have provisionally Helen and Bill nominated on behalf of the forum. Do I have to do anything formally around that, Emma, or is that okay with colleagues? And Kate?
I mean, we could take a formal vote on it just so that we're clear on who the representatives are. So we've got Bill and Helen who would be interested. So perhaps we could just have a show of hands if everybody's in favour of that.
Thank you, colleagues. If you're in favour, thank you.
Yeah, that's carried by a majority. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And Bill, something else to say?
Last bit from me would be to clarify. I'm just wondering, Emma, whether or not it would be appropriate to say, I'm partly putting myself forward because I'm also vice chair. And is it appropriate for us to say, you know, Kate, if you seek chair and vice chair's contribution to that, you know, Guy, it's like most of the other working groups, other things, is how all these things align. In your role as chair, having done it, I think it's useful if the two of us could say we would contribute towards that anyway. And you know, it helps in our roles with the forum, let alone helping with the local authority.
No, of course, but I thought that I sort of took that as read, but was hoping no one would raise it. That's the default position, but thank you very much. Yes. Is that okay, Kate?
That's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And we've got an expression from Rob Gasson as well. Thank you, Rob. So we have two nominations, a default position from the chair and the vice chair, and Rob also happy to contribute. Are we happy to leave that there, or is there any follow-up questions for Julie and Sharon particularly before we move on to further items? Andy Wynne?
Sorry, just really would like to draw attention to page 35, paragraph, the first one under the background for high needs block. We had previously stated, because that was the case, that the high needs block, of the high needs block, 83, just over 83% goes straight out to providers. That's increased to 87%. And if that's when we're looking at the budgets, when we're looking at the actual spend, we're spending 96% of the high needs block, which is why we're struggling. And I wanted to just draw that to everybody's attention as we move into the next paper. And also, I'm hoping that there are no questions around the CSSB. I felt that it was fairly self-explanatory, but I'm happy to take any. But we sort of glossed past that piece.
Thanks, Andy. Any questions for Andy? Thank you, Helen.
Yeah, just to say, the other thing I wanted to say on this really was that it doesn't feel really comfortable to me that we're, you know, a constant overspend in terms of the high needs block, especially the figures that we're talking about. And I know we're being asked for decision. We are being asked for decision at this meeting, and I just wanted to make a comment really that I think as a group, as forum members, I think we need to either decide to fund it differently, or request a review really of how the spend is being used, and to make sure it is as efficient and as spent as it can be to support our most vulnerable people, or a combination of both. It's just a comment really.
Okay, thank you for the comment. Any thoughts from forum members or council officers? It's the same point. Your paper, colleagues, just points to pressure. Andy, and then Kate, please.
All I was going to say is that we are seeing a lot of pressure. I'm doing a bit of work at the moment with Gareth, looking at the increase in spend over the last 3 to 4 years or so, and it's been quite marked, and it's largely in those areas where we're supporting pupils directly, through element 3, element 2, in AP and post 16 and so on. So yes, there's work going on there, and we're more than happy to share those figures with you at future meetings.
Okay, thank you. So there is a lot of activity documented and has begun. So it's a question of reporting on the progress and the impact of that regularly. Kate?
Just to take Helen's point, I think that is exactly what the DSG task group is doing. It will look at all of the lines, so including the high needs block. So that is that review and proposed actions. I'm happy for that to have a report that comes to forum as it makes its way through. I've also seen Bill's comment regarding cash cap and case. My only concern is the bigger the group gets, the harder it is for us to meet, and this needs to be a proactive piece of work and very quick. It's going to be quite an intensive piece of work, so I'm happy to offer the invitation. What I wouldn't want it to do is to stall the progress of that task group.
Okay, thank you, Kate. I think, does the schools forum, correct me if I'm wrong, the schools forum represents those groups and therefore can work in partnership and feedback? Question stroke comment? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rob. Any other comments or questions on item 8 before we move on? Okay, thank you, colleagues. Allowing for any delay, we'll move on to item 9. Please, pages 46 to 58, schools funding formula. Okay.
Thanks, Andy. Hopefully you've all had a chance to read the documents that have come out. I wasn't going to spend an awful lot of time going through the executive summaries. What I will say is that when we wrote these reports, I was working off the back of estimated pupil numbers. And we were estimating a growth in pupil numbers across Cornwall schools of 487 pupils in primary, 875 in secondary. In order to double check that data, I went back to the stats team and asked for some early figures from the actual census that's just happened, and I've been told that actually in the primary sector, there are a lot of deferrals. There are a lot of pupils that are being held back and not starting at normal time. And also there's been quite a significant increase in the number of elective home education pupils. So where we were anticipating a growth of 487 in primary, we're looking now at a reduction of 364 pupils. And the growth in secondary was 875, was projected to be 875. It's now looking more like 538. So that's about 1,100 pupils or so that have dropped out of the count. And so at the moment, I think this is a national issue. It's been raised, I think, by the Local Government Association with the DFE, the ESFA, that potentially this is going to have a knock-on effect to the level of DSG that we will receive. Now, some of the primary pupils may be captured under the reception uplift element of the count, but the EHE pupils won't necessarily be. So there's quite a significant impact there. The projected figure will drop by 5.7 million as a result of those pupils not being in the count. Now, until we get the actual settlement, I can't really say, how things are going to work out. But I just wanted to raise that point before we start talking about these figures, which were based on the forecast figures.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Interesting. That's a huge number. in my book, 1,100 across the county. I'm conscious that obviously it's a national problem. I'm just interested in the actual operational logistics of when and if we see a return of pupils to school. The mechanism to support schools, presumably the only uplift you get in funding would be when the next census arrives and comes in. I'm just thinking of if you've got pockets, and we know the pockets in particular urban areas, should we preempt this with support for schools, or do something a little bit more operational? Because if we know it's a lot are coming back, it only seems sensible.
Yeah, I think that the issue there is that, you know, whilst we would look to try to support schools as much as we possibly could, we wouldn't necessarily have the money in at the front end of this process through the DSG. So we're hoping that various lobby groups will be, you know, and will be involved in that. We'll be talking to the DFE, ESFA about this to see what they're going to do, if anything. As this is a national issue and it's linked clearly to the pandemic in the main, I would anticipate that they would try to do something to mitigate this, but I might be just being a little bit optimistic.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Bill?
Yeah, I'm with Andy on this one. I think this is about addressing the national issue and the risk with, you know, that exists. We all know there's an awful lot of anxious people out there who are hopeful that, you know, vaccines and changes, you know, will come through, and as a result we will likely see a number of students returning who have been missed through the census processes, and when they come back in there will be an expectation to provide for that education. These are not children that have just disappeared and as a result aren't to be funded or can be refunded or supported elsewhere around the country. They're children that exist within Cornwall. They deserve to be supported in the longer term. Schools are being asked yet again to do more with less if that money does not get sustained, and if it disappears out the system, it's tragic. So 5.7 million is a significant sum of money, and you know, I would hope that there are various people who can pick this one up and run with this one to campaign on it. Otherwise, there are many children who are in the schools will be impacted by this, as well as those returning later. They will miss out funding wise hugely. All right, big issue. Let's not underestimate it.
No, thank you, Bill. I can draw your attention to Kate's comments in the chat. And Kate, are you wishing to say something as well?
Just to provide assurance, we are raising it regularly with the Regional Schools Commissioner. We have raised it with MPs in our MP meetings. So in terms of making everybody aware of it, we certainly are doing that. But there is a national piece of work going on. I'm also aware that Ofsted are undertaking a piece of work around it as well, because they are concerned about the financial impact for school budgets, both in terms of the loss now and the potential impact of returners later.
Thank you, Kate. Craig?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any actual information available to identify the pockets of this in preparation and planning, just to help providers cope with the demand. The financial bit is a secondary bit to this. Obviously, we're all doing our best to help with that, but I'm just wondering if there is intelligence that you know you can identify as a head or as a CEO to tell you if there's a pocket of EHE which is quite large, which are going to come into your school or schools.
Colleagues, any reflections on Craig's question?
And we will know the schools that they've left from to become EHE, and clearly heads will know their own schools where they've left. We know where there are some pockets, and we are talking with those schools. What we can't account for is whether they'll return to the school they left from, and the other ones are those that have never arrived in a school, and parents who are delaying or opting for elective home education at the moment while they wait and see what happens.
Okay, thank you. Craig, any further thoughts, or colleagues, any further comments before handing back to Andy? Helen?
Yeah, just to ask really, I don't know if we've got any mechanism by which we can address those sort of companies that are setting up to support families with their home education, because I think there's some companies that have really capitalised on it, try and you know, basically encourage parents to do so. and that they can offer all sorts of lovely support out there for them, without obviously being qualified schools. So I don't know whether we have any capacity to do that, or identify them at least.
We'd only identify them in exactly the same way that anybody else would, which would be if they were advertising. And I think we, as a council, we will have to be very careful in terms of the line we tread around being seen to interfere with fair practice. What will be interesting is whether there's any regulatory framework about these if they start to become expand.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Any further questions or comments? Andy, anything else to add?
No, I'm just sorry to drop that bombshell at the start of the report. Just felt that it was important for context.
Yep.
Okay. So Joe Lombard has just flashed up as rejoining the meeting.
I've pressed admit.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on, there's a complication this year to some extent in that the ESFA have decided to merge the Teachers Pay Grant and the TPECG, the Employers Contribution Grant, into the Dedicated Schools Grant this year. And there are all manner of provisos around how we calculate funding for schools. Bearing that in mind, we will be baselining the grant that's been received for 2021 into the baseline calculations, so that minimum funding guarantee and gains ceiling will not taper money out unduly. So rest assured that we've got that sort of sorted, and there will be there are some regulations around providers in the high needs block who receive TPG and TPECG, that they should not be materially worse off as a result of this. So we'll be looking at baselining budgets there for providers in the high needs block. Apart from that, basically the ESFA have updated the funding rates. I've shown them a little bit later on in the report on page 52, and I've pulled together on page 51 a proposed set of budgets based on, again, as I said, the forecast figures, showing block transfers. It's a little bit presumptuous, I understand, but it was just to give us an idea of the collective nature of what we're proposing, so that you can see what the impact is. I'll talk a little bit about the high needs block. I'm actually happy to take any questions about sort of pages 51 and 52 if you have any. It's interesting when you look at the funding rates, how much of an emphasis the ESFA place on prior attainment, on free school meals, and how little they place on the income deprivation factors. You can see the huge shift in our funding from 2017-18, when we came up with the rates for Cornwall, and how we've now moved to the national funding formula rates. So that's quite an interesting transition. Minimum funding guarantee has been limited. Normally the ESFA provide a guideline range for the minimum funding guarantee. This year it's between 0.5 and 2%. Normally what we try to do is to apply the maximum rate, so that schools who are, if you like, transitioning down towards the new national funding formula still see a decent increase year on year. The Central School Services block budgets are detailed on page 53, and what I've shown in that table, in table 3, is the budgets that were set for 2021, and then the proposed budgets for 21-22, along with the block transfers to keep those budgets sort of afloat. The issue that we have with the Central School Services block is that the ESFA are adopting a mechanism whereby they are scaling back the legacy element of the Central School Services block budgets. Unfortunately, the rate that they're scaling it back at doesn't match the rate of reduction in cost. So we're left with a pressure year on year. And I've detailed how much they've taken out of the Central School Services block over the last couple of years. and that's all really by way of setting context again. Looking at the de-delegated budgets, I've detailed those, and then really it's just a case almost of going through the proposals one by one and making decisions pending any discussion that we'd like to have about the paper so far.
Thanks, Andy. So before we move on, are there any comments or questions for Andy on the report or the content? Okay, Sean?
I just wanted to give Andy possibly a bit of reassurance yesterday. This was very timely, this document turning up. I actually raised a 3-year projection live in a school yesterday, and actually the new scales and tables are stacking up. They are making sense. So, for example, obviously the loss of the teachers' pay and pension grant is being more than offset, and the expected growth in income did tie up in that school with the number of children that had gone up. I think one concern I would have is where the ceiling gain is likely to be levied, because for some of our very smaller schools that we've got within our trust, some of these huge increases to things like sparsity, I can just see them going in as quickly or going out as quickly as they come in. So the regional officers are convinced that our small schools will be propped up by the new sparsity rates, but as we've pointed out to them, we suspect that the ceiling gain will simply strip them back out. And also, again, with the smaller schools, there will be a significant loss for them around the change in the way that the pension and pay grant is allocated, because they were getting a guaranteed sum, but obviously as everything moves towards the more bums on seat method, which I am completely in favour of, the smaller schools will eventually begin to become more difficult to fund. And again, we have raised this with the regional officers.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Any other questions or comments, please, colleagues? Helen?
Yeah, just a question out of interest really, and just to get a little bit more detail. On the top of page 56, it talks about the music hub. Can I just check 2 things? One, can I ask if that 134,000, how does that compare to previous years? And 2, can I ask that, can I get clarification that the hub will be allocating that fund to providers based on government guidance?
I can come back on the budget. The budget is exactly the same as in previous years. It's slightly misleading in this report in that the music service hub is not 134,000, it's actually 166,000. But in order to sidestep the regulations around the central school services block limits, we established a ring-fenced budget within the high needs block. I can't really answer as to how the funding is allocated. I'm not sure who deals with that. Sharon,
thank you, Sharon. You might be. That sounds like an operational question to me, Sharon.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say, Guy. The forum decision has been made about the funding, and it's for the music hub to determine how that money is allocated, and that is happening.
Right. So there's a communication issue potentially from the music hub. That's the response to.
I would say that the work is ongoing and it is happening as required, as to how the hub would deliver. It isn't a forum question.
Okay. Thank you, Bill.
First off, before I go any further, I'm on the music hub, so I'm on the board of the music, okay. so people are aware. And therefore, I'm just going to say that Sharon's put it in there. I think the actual question itself, the scope of the schools forum is about allocation of funding for the purposes which we believe are appropriate. How it's actually delivered, I think that falls within the scope of other bodies. And in terms of Andy saying about the regulations, I think it's just worth making the note there that actually the reason why it's in the high needs block is because fundamentally some of the work there about the provisions for supporting young people they are young people who have got special needs, who fall within the category of the high needs block. And that's why it comes from 2 different areas. So it's covered without any issues. There's no conflicts in any way.
Okay, thank you, Bill, and thank you, Helen, for the question. Any other questions for Andy, colleagues? Okay, I'll just wait for the awkward delay. and then we'll move on, Andy, if I may. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we get into the proposed way forward?
Not really. I think the only thing I would say is that clearly we've got some issues in the high needs block. I think that we're in a sort of perfect storm. I'm grateful that the national funding formula is allocating more money to Cornwall. Clearly, when we started this process back in 2017-18, and they started to level us, to move us towards a more level playing field, should we say. We did a calculation that showed that if we were running the national funding formula for the high needs block in its entirety, 100% effect, we would have double the funding that we had in that year. So we've got some way to go. There's still a significant gap that needs to be closed, but there are other cost pressures at the moment. I'm sure you'll understand in terms of the central government. So they're doing what they can. It's never going to be quite quick enough for us. We'd like to be funded at the appropriate level. It's a case really of the pressure that we're facing, the number of pupils that we're facing, the complexity of need of those pupils is outstripping the rate at which we're having our funding adjusted. And I kind of like to remind colleagues in a way that we have been underfunded for many years. That's as a result of us. It's a historic legacy. We always have been a high delegator to schools. Some of this, I feel, is probably redressing that balance, but that's also then been overtaken by other policies and directions that the ESFA want to take us in. So other than that, I think it's just a case of moving through the various proposals. At proposal 8, that's de-delegated funding only, so that's only maintained schools that would vote on that. But all the proposals from 1 to 7 and proposal 16 are for all schools.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Before we move on to that, Bill, would you like to add anything?
Thanks, Guy. We moved on very rapidly, and I fully appreciate Helen's question in the mix, but we were in the central school services block conversation.
So yes.
Apologies, Bill. Yeah.
And the first vote, which we're moving towards in a moment, or first proposal, is linked to block transfers. Yeah. So that they're relevant, they link back in. And it's not so much a question as an observation, and it's my ignorance, forgive me, in the mix. So in the table that's on page 53, I'm looking at the two budgets, currently 2021 and the proposals, and I'm looking for where the block transfer may go towards. And I look at what's happening over time. Now, I fully appreciate, Andy, the difference in the variance that exists between the way that the budget is being reduced from central government versus where we would be hoping to taper it down, okay, and reduce it ourselves. But it does feel that the identified areas where there would be a reduction if we didn't do the block transfer are the ones where there would be a direct impact on the students. And what I'm thinking here is, I suppose, is there the longer term, there is going to be further reductions in this budget, as far as I understand it. If there's going to be further reductions, there are going to have to be squeezes in other areas. So when I look at education services, business support staying at the same level, and one or two others staying at the same level, is there an intended squeeze on those? Is there a direction of travel associated with that? And therefore, it's I get it. It's all the money's in the same pot, and it's got to go somewhere. But there's going to have to be savings all across the board, and I'm just wondering where they sit in maybe one or two other areas. If there's plans afoot, I'll accept that as a yes. Okay, but I just need to know.
Yeah, at the moment, in order to try and keep things afloat, I've just replicated the proposed block transfers that we undertook in 2021. We will be reviewing all of those other budgets. We've not started the process, or we're at the very beginning of the process in terms of looking at budgets for 21-22 at the moment. I have nominally reduced the premature retirement costs budget and the education services grant budget to make the whole thing balanced to the funds that we have available. That might not be the case. We could end up adjusting any one of those other budget lines as we move through this process, or all of the budget lines as we move through this process in an effort to balance it. So at the moment, these are very loose proposals as to the budgets. When we get into the meat of the matter, the reductions may be spread across further lines.
So what colleagues, just on that point then, Andy, I just wanted colleagues to be aware and to appreciate that that's it. This is about, if there's a block transfer, it's about facilitating change. It isn't about these exact changes. And it's an appreciation and acceptance of forum members, or not, as the case may be, of that there are pressures, and as a result, we can't be explicit, but we need to work them through and just accept these pressures exist, and particularly the implications around high needs. Yes, this one as well. All right, but there's further work going on, yeah?
There is, yeah, and to some extent the CSSB budgets will be impacted on by the final people counts as well. So the situation may yet worsen. We don't know.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for that helpful. I'm conscious I don't want to glaze over items before we move on to the proposals, because there's a lot of information in the report from Andy. Are there any other comments or questions or points of clarification colleagues would like before we move on? Okay, so I'm looking now at the approvals and the bullet points under item 9, and if we move to page 5, item 5, page 55, Emma, just in terms of process, could I ask, so I'm going to take each proposal or sub-proposal all the way down, ask for a proposer, seconder, and a show of hands, and you will capture this as I move forward?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes. So as Andy just said, proposals 1 through to 7 is everybody. Then proposals through 8 down through to 14 are maintained schools. 15 is also maintained schools, and 16 is everybody.
Thank you, Emma.
We'll be looking for a proposer, seconder, and a show of hands.
Okay, and colleagues, in terms of your declaration of interest, I assume you will abstain from some of the voting. Is that correct, Emma?
Yeah, where forum members feel they have an interest in a particular item, yes, they should abstain from voting.
Okay, thank you. Andy, Wing?
So just wanted to draw attention to proposal 2 is actually split down to 4 sub-proposals when you're taking votes. Okay, just to note.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to take a vote on each one of those sub-proposals.
Yeah, we might be in a situation where colleagues may not wish to support CAF or CAPS or cash or one of those proposals. So I've given the option to pick off what people want to support. So there's a bit of flexibility.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I hope that's clear, colleagues. Could I encourage you to be on your best behaviour and not to try and confuse the chair, because I am easily confused. So if we start with proposal number 1, I'm not going to read them out. I'm going to ask for a proposer for number 1, please. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bill. I'm going to take the X as a proposal, and second by someone, please. Thank you. So a show of hands in favour of 1, please. Okay, thank you. Against? And any abstentions, please? Okay, thank you. So that's proposal 1. You got that, Emma?
I've got that one, and that one has been carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I move on to proposal 2, please, and have a proposer? So number 1, thank you, Rob. So it's 2, number 1. A seconder, please. Thank you, Craig. So if we can move to a vote, all those in favour, please vote. Thank you. And all those against?
Okay.
And anyone abstaining? Thank you. Got it, Emma?
I've got that one, and that one has been carried.
Wonderful. Thank you, colleagues. So I'm now looking at proposal 2, number 2, to maintain the music service just in case. So could I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Rob. And seconded by? Thank you, Craig. So we'll move to a vote. All those in favour, show your hands, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone not in favour? And any abstaining? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That has been carried.
Thank you. So moving on to number 3. Someone to propose, please. Thank you, Helen. And Sean, I can take that as a seconded, so we could vote on that one. Those in favour?
Okay.
Thank you. Those against? And anyone abstaining?
Thank you.
Number 4, please. Again, a proposer. Thank you, Craig. Anyone second? Thank you, Sean. So we move to vote. Those in favour, please, on number 4.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone against? And any abstentions? No, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. That's been carried.
Thank you, Emma. So I'm moving on to now proposal number 3. Could anyone propose number 3, please? Thank you, Bill. And Sean, you put 5. That's an X, so I'm assuming you'll second that. Thank you.
Yeah.
I thought we'd move to 5.
No, we're on. There's 4. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
4 to number 2. So I'm on formally proposal 3. Proposal 2 had 4 parts. Do I need to go back and check the voting, Sean? No? Okay, thank you. So just to confirm, colleagues, I'm formally on the proposal 3 to agree the block transfer of £500,000 to support alternative education. So I'm looking for someone to propose that, which I think Bill has, and Katie is seconding it. Yes, so we can move to vote on that proposal, all those 4. Thank you. All those against? Anyone abstaining? Thank you. Okay, that's proposal 3. Proposal 4.
That has been, proposal 3 has been carried. Sorry.
Sorry, thank you, Emma.
Okay.
So proposal 4, could somebody please propose? Thank you, Sean. Second? Ooh. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Craig. So we can move to vote on proposal 4. All those in favour, raise your hand, please.
Thank you.
Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Okay, thank you, Emma.
No, that has been carried.
Thank you. So moving on to proposal 5. And that's the continuation of the national funding formula published rates. Thank you, Rob. And thank you, Chris. Thank you. So I'm taking that as proposed and seconded. So we move to a vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands.
Okay.
And anyone against?
No.
Anyone abstaining? Thank you, Emma.
Thank you. That's been carried.
Wonderful. So I'm on to proposal 6, please. Again, someone to propose, please. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Helen. So I'll take that as proposed and seconded. So we move to a vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Thank you, Emma.
Okay. Thank you. That's been carried.
And I think for the last one, relevant to the whole form at the moment, is that correct? Number 7?
Number 7, that's everybody, yeah?
Yeah, thank you. So could I have someone to propose number 7, please?
Okay.
Thank you. And second?
Thank you.
Thank you. So if we move to all those in favour, please raise your hands.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any against? Abstaining? Wonderful, thank you. So if we move on, before we move on, to acknowledge that proposal 8 is for maintained schools only, is that correct, Emma?
Proposal 8 is for primary maintained only.
Only. So proposal 8, primary maintained only. Catherine has proposed, thank you, and it's been seconded, thank you. So colleagues from primary maintained, could I ask you to raise your hands in favour?
Thank you, Chairman, that's carried.
Thank you. And proposal 9 is the same, is that right, Emma?
That's
Maintained
correct.
primary.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
So again, could I have, thank you, thank you. So if we move to vote, all those in favour?
Thank you, Chair, that's been carried.
Wonderful, thank you. So if I move to item 10, again, that's maintained primary only.
That is correct, yes.
Correct. So colleagues, could I have that? Thank you. Thank you. All those in favour, please raise your hands.
Thank you, that has been carried.
Thank you. Now, 11 is secondary maintained only.
That is correct.
Colleagues, could I have a proposed and seconded, please, for the secondary? Thank you. Thank you. Could we move to vote? All those in favour, please raise your hands.
Thank you, Chair, that's been carried.
Wonderful. Thank you. Proposal 12 is for primary schools only. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, thank you. Seconded by anyone, please? Thank you. So we can move to vote on that, primary colleagues.
Oh, sorry.
Before we move any further, sorry, Helen, would you like to ask a question for clarification on proposal 12?
Yeah, sorry, I was slow in typing actually. I had it on my notes. For most of these proposals, we're de-delegating these funds. It says for available to primary schools, but should that not read maintained schools, because the nursery schools are also in receipt of maternity grants, cover, etc., age union representative, etc.
If I can answer that one, these are de-delegated figures from the national funding formula allocations, and as you get your allocations through a separate funding formula, the de-delegation doesn't really apply to nurseries.
Thanks, Andy. Helen, anything to add?
No, that's fine. I just wanted to check, because obviously we do benefit from those, but it's not de-delegated from our budget. But I just wanted to check as a point of just to make sure it was correct. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Thank you for asking. So just to confirm, I think we're on proposal 12?
That's correct, Chairman. At the moment, it's proposed by Pete Hamlin and seconded by Catherine Hunkin, so we just need a vote.
Thank you. So we move. All those in favour, raise your hand, please.
Thank you, Chairman. That's carried.
Thank you. So moving on to 13, again, for primary schools only.
That's correct.
Thank you. And seconded by? Someone. Thank you very much, Catherine. So we move to a vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands.
Thank you, Chair. That's carried.
Wonderful. Thank you. So now we move on to proposal 14, which is maintain secondary schools only.
That's correct.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Craig. Move to vote, please. All those in favour, please raise your.
Thank you, Chair. That's carried.
Thank you very much. Now, proposal 15, if I understand, is all maintained schools.
That's correct.
So would possible to have that proposed and seconded, please, by maintained colleagues? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you please raise your hands in favour?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So that was 15.
Thank you. That's carried.
Thank you. So proposal 16, I believe, is open to the whole forum.
That's correct.
Could I ask for a proposer? Thank you, Rob, and seconded. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Helen. So move to vote. All those in favour, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Or anyone against or abstaining?
I'm abstaining, Guy, because I'm vice chair and it includes me in the proposal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Chair. Confirm that's been carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for making that so swift and slick. I appreciate that. I think that concludes the business under item 9. Am I right?
You are right.
Thank you very much.
Hey, excellent. Okay, thank you. So item 10. Item 10, thank you, Rob. Item 10, date of future meetings, they're there to note. And obviously there's a considerable amount of work that's going to carry on in the meantime. There's no other comment I need to make under all of that, is there, Emma? Dates are there?
No, that's it. The dates are there. I'll send out electronic invites. At the moment, we obviously don't know whether these will be virtual online meetings or will actually be attending County Hall, but I'm sure by April we'll have an idea as to whether it is a virtual online meeting. Thank you.
No, wonderful. Thank you. So moving to item 11, I don't have any other business that the chair considers urgent, and I haven't been, none has been shared. And Emma, you don't have anything?
Thank you, Chair. No, I have not been advised of any urgent business.
So then it just leaves me to thank colleagues for your time at a busy time. So thank you very much. Thank council colleagues for all of the work and effort and the papers and answering the questions. And wish you a Merry Christmas, maybe? I don't know. Thank you very much, everybody. And I draw the meeting to a close at 11:38.
Thank you, Chairman.
Wonderful. Thanks, colleagues. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Guy. Well done.
Thank you.
Guy. Take care. Bye.
Thank you very much. Take care, everyone. See you soon.
Cheers.
Guy. Thank you. Bye now.
Chair, we'll just get confirmation that the live stream has been turned off. So if anybody, well, everybody could just make sure if they haven't left that they actually pause their mute button.